Imagine looking out the window of a commercial airliner, right? And seeing a dark, completely silent wedge-shaped craft flash right past your cockpit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's like so close you physically duck out of reflex.
Pure instinct, yeah.
Exactly. You have absolute, undeniable visual confirmation that this thing is right there. But when you frantically call air traffic control to report, a near-midair collision, they tell you the sky is completely empty.
Which is just, yeah, that's a terrifying scenario for any pilot.
It really is. And the crazy thing is that isn't a pitch for a sci-fi script. That actually happened to the crew of British Airways Flight 561 as they were on approach to Manchester Airport.
Right, the pilots were looking right at a massive physical object, yet the highly advanced radar systems, the ones designed specifically to keep that airspace safe, they detected absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
Yeah, just a complete sensor blackout. It's wild.
It really is. Well, welcome to today's Duck Dive. Today is Thursday, April 9, 2026. And we are embarking on a mission today that I think completely shatters our comforting sort of binary way of looking at the skies.
Yeah, that idea that if something is up there, our technology will automatically track it.
Exactly. Our roadmap for today is a really fascinating stack of intelligence from the newly released 2026 book, Inside the U.S. Government Covert UFO Program, Future Visions, by Dr. James T. Lakatsky.
It's a heavy read, but a really important one.
It is, and I want to set the parameters right up front for you listening.
Yeah.
This deep dive is not about debating if unidentified aerial phenomena or UAPs exist. We're moving well past that.
Right, because the source material here takes their existence as a functional given.
Yeah, they aren't questioning it.
Exactly. It's based on decades of hard sensor data and military encounters. The question for them isn't whether they are there, it's how they are operating with such impunity.
Right. So our mission today is to decode the actual declassified science of how these crafts hide from us. We are looking at the mechanics of what the military calls signature reduction.
Which is basically the highly advanced art of invisibility, evasion, and deception.
Yeah, and we are basing this entirely on the Defense Intelligence Agency's own covert $22 million research program. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Because we are going on a journey from some genuinely baffling historical encounters all the way into the bleeding edge of theoretical physics. I mean, we're talking negative energy bubbles and nanometamaterials.
It gets really intense. But
Yeah.
to really grasp the mechanics of how these crafts manipulate our sensors, we first have to understand who is studying them and the surprisingly broad scope of their research.
Right. It kind of sets the foundation for everything we're going to discuss.
It really does.
So the book details a program called AAWSAP. That stands for the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. And this was a covert DIA initiative that ran from 2008 to 2010. The actual day-to-day contract was executed by BAS, which is Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies.
And this was a massive undertaking. BAS employed over 75 contractor personnel performing exotic aerospace research.
Wow. Just dedicated to this.
Yeah, and that was supplemented by hundreds of part-time personnel doing field work.
Oh.
They were officially tasked with building the world's largest coherent UAP database to analyze threat potential.
And the output was intense, right? They produced 38 highly technical papers.
Yeah, they're known as Defense Intelligence Reference Documents, or DRDs.
DRDs, yeah. And these covered 12 specific technical areas like lift, propulsion, power generation, and our focus today, signature reduction.
Exactly.
But here's the massive paradigm shift that the book reveals. AAWSAP didn't just study your standard nuts and bolts metallic crafts. They followed the data into some deeply strange, highly controversial territory.
Yeah, they really did.
They incorporated the paranormal.
And that decision was a very deliberate, scientifically driven choice by the program directors.
Really?
Yeah, because when you are dealing with a phenomenon that consistently defies known physics, prematurely narrowing the scope of your investigation, well, it yields a distorted data set.
I have to push back on this, though, because this is where my brain starts flashing warning lights,
That's fair.
If the military is pouring millions of dollars into figuring out the aerodynamics or the radar jamming capabilities of a physical craft, why are they investigating haunted houses?
I know how it sounds.
Right, because the book notes they extensively studied Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, It mentions witnesses experiencing poltergeist effects, discarnate voices, and like flying orbs in their homes after an encounter.
Yeah, it's wild stuff.
Isn't trying to study stealth capabilities by looking at poltergeists like trying to reverse engineer a submarine by interviewing a psychic? I mean, why did the Pentagon care about poltergeists?
It sounds counterintuitive, right? Perhaps even absurd, until you look at how the data was actually clustering. The analysts weren't out hunting ghosts, They were noticing a statistical correlation. The data showed that the consciousness effects, what you're calling the paranormal fallout, were inextricably linked to the physical presence of the craft.
Wait, so you're saying the bizarre stuff is basically environmental fallout from whatever technology the craft is running?
Precisely. To quote the text directly, the relationship is unavoidable.
Huh.
The book points out that Kenneth Arnold, the pilot who essentially kicked off the modern UFO era in 1947 when he saw those famous chevron-shaped objects.
Yeah, the classic flying saucer guy.
Right. Well, he subsequently had balls of light flying around his home and experienced a litany of paranormal events.
Wait, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a common pattern. AAWSAP's philosophy was that if you only look for metal and radar pings, you completely miss the actual context of the phenomenon.
I see.
You have to study everything the phenomenon does to understand its true mechanisms.
Yeah.
You cannot separate the two if you want the full picture.
Okay, I can see the logic there. You can't just toss out the weird data because it makes you uncomfortable, right?
Right.
The weirdness might be a literal symptom of the technology.
Exactly.
So if we accept that broad scope, let's look at the physical evasion data they actually collected on how these crafts hide in the real world. Because if these things are dynamically adapting to our radar, they can't just be using passive metal coatings like our stealth jets.
Right, the case files in the AAWSAP database show a clear, escalating evolution of signature reduction. It actively keeps pace with human detection systems.
It's reactive.
Highly reactive.
The examples are staggering, honestly. We talked about the British Airways flight having visual confirmation but no radar signature, but then you have the exact inverse of that scenario in the sources.
Yeah, the Massey Air Park incident.
Exactly, in Florida in 1990. So a police helicopter is flying at night, and it's equipped with FLIR, which is forward-looking infrared. The pilot looks at his thermal screen and sees a strangely shaped black image moving at 70 miles per hour. But when he looks out the window,
Nothing there.
the sky is empty. It is completely invisible to the naked eye. It's only emitting a thermal signature.
Which demonstrates an ability to selectively manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum. It gets even more complex when we look at active camouflage.
Right, like the Loveland, Colorado case in 2000.
Yeah, that's a great example.
A father and son are observing a disc-shaped object, and as they're watching it, the craft actively turns off its strobe light and the orange lights that were rotating around its edge, and then it turns on a pattern of lights that perfectly mimics the conventional aviation lights of a small human airplane.
It literally recognized it was being observed and altered its visual signature to blend into the expected environment.
That is so creepy.
It is. And then we see reports of aggressive electronic warfare, too.
Oh, like the Pascagoula case.
Yeah, in 1973, in Mississippi, a local civil defense station's radar picked up an anomalous return. It approached within 3 miles and then completely blacked out their entire radar system.
Let's shut it down.
Jammed it so severely,
Yeah.
the unit developed streaks across the screen.
Wow. And sometimes they just bypass the sensors entirely and literally vanish, like the 2008 case off the coast of Galveston, Texas.
Sure.
An oil rig crew watched a white saucer in a clear blue sky for 5 minutes. Then, while they were staring right at it, it just ceased to be there.
It's gone.
Disappeared into thin air. It really feels like playing a game of cosmic hide-and-seek with an opponent who can rewrite the rules mid-match. I mean, are they actively reacting to our specific observation methods in real time?
What's fascinating here is that the AAWSAP analysts concluded these are not simple mechanical glitches or static stealth coatings.
Right.
This is evidence of an adaptive, multi-level risk program. When it comes to radar, for instance, the crafts appear to employ something called repeater jamming.
Now, standard jamming just blasts loud electronic noise to blind a radar, right? How is repeater jamming different from that?
Standard jamming is a brute force approach. It's just noise. Repeater jamming is akin to a sophisticated cyber attack on the radar wave itself.
Oh, wow.
The craft ingests the incoming radar energy sent by our systems, analyzes the specific frequency and pulse, manipulates it internally, and then retransmits a perfectly tailored false signal back to our receiver.
So it's essentially feeding our radar a hallucination.
Yes, exactly. It can change the range, the velocity, or the angle the radar perceives. Combined with visual mimicry, it demonstrates an intelligence actively assessing human detection technology and neutralizing it on the fly.
Which brings us to the actual theoretical physics AAWSAP studied. If they are spoofing radar and vanishing from plain sight, there has to be a physical mechanism allowing them to rewrite their signatures.
Right, there's science behind it.
The book details the science of hiding in plain sight, and they look at our own cutting-edge physics to explain it.
AAWSAP's approach was essentially reverse engineering. By studying the absolute limits of human scientific research, they hope to understand the threat potential of the UAP's far superior capabilities.
Let's start with plasma screens, then. A lot of witness reports mention these crafts having a strange glow, fuzzy edges, or completely lacking a sonic boom even at supersonic speeds. The book explains this could be achieved using a plasma screen, and apparently the Russian aircraft industry has been actively developing this.
Yes, they have. Instead of trying to design an aerodynamic frame with sharp angles that geometrically reflect radar waves away like the U.S. stealth bombers do.
Right, like the angular-looking planes.
Exactly. The Russian system uses a lightweight generator to emit powerful electron beams. This ionizes the air immediately surrounding the craft, enveloping it in a cloud of plasma.
But wait, how does a cloud of ionized air actually stop a radar wave?
Well, when the incoming radar energy hits that plasma field, it interacts with the charged particles. The energy of the radar wave is either converted into thermal energy, so heat, or its frequency is drastically shifted.
I see.
The result is that almost no coherent signal bounces back to the receiver. The craft effectively absorbs the radar.
Okay, that handles radar. But what about visual stealth? The book dives into nanophotonics, specifically something called plasmons.
Right. Plasmons address the fundamental way we see objects. We see a craft because light hits its surface and scatters back into our eyes.
That makes sense.
If you can prevent that scattering, the object becomes visually undetectable. Plasmons are created when electrons on the surface of a metallic material are engineered to move in a highly coordinated collective rhythm.
So it's like tuning a guitar string so it perfectly resonates with a specific sound wave.
That's an excellent way to think about it. If you force those surface electrons into a synchronized wave that perfectly matches the frequency of incoming visible light, that light energy is absorbed by the resonating electrons.
So it just doesn't bounce back.
Exactly, it doesn't scatter. A plasmonic cloaker could theoretically dynamically tune its surface electrons to absorb whatever light is hitting it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. That leads right into metamaterials, which genuinely sounds like magic until you break down the mechanics.
It does sound like magic, yeah.
The book notes that the U.S. Department of Energy's Ames laboratory actually developed a silver-based, mesh-like material that has a negative refractive index for visible light.
This is one of the most significant breakthroughs they analyzed. Natural materials, like a glass prism or a pool of water, refract or bend light in a positive direction. They bend the light wave inward.
Right, like looking through a glass of water.
Yes, but these artificially created metamaterials force the light to bend backward.
Wait, bending light backwards? That sounds like a literal Harry Potter invisibility cloak. I mean, you wrap it around an object and it just vanishes. But the book explains it's about the physical geometry of the material, not some chemical coating, right?
Exactly. Forget Harry Potter. Think of a massive boulder sitting in the middle of a rushing river.
Okay.
Because of the shape of the riverbed and the current, the water flows smoothly around the rock and rejoins seamlessly on the other side.
Right.
If you were looking from downstream, just watching the water flow, you'd never know the boulder was there.
Because the flow is perfectly routed around the obstruction.
Right. Metamaterials do this to electromagnetic waves. They are engineered with microscopic structures that are actually smaller than the wavelength of the light itself.
Wow, that small.
Yes. These subwavelength structures physically trap and reroute the magnetic and electric components of the light wave simultaneously, forcing it to curve completely around the object.
That is incredible. And the source also mentions a patent by Richard Schoengert called Project Camellia, right?
Yes, that's another piece of the puzzle.
Which uses optoelectronics to basically project the background onto the foreground object. So AAWSAP is looking at Ames Lab, they're looking at Project Camellia, and they're realizing that human science is just now sketching out the theoretical blueprints for true cloaking.
Exactly. We are using our nascent understanding of skin plasmonics and metamaterials to explain the seemingly impossible disappearances witnesses have reported since the 1940s.
Yeah.
We're looking at our own blueprints to figure out how their finished house was built, essentially.
But the AAWSAP documents go even further than manipulating the electromagnetic spectrum. It's one thing to bend light or absorb radar. The documents suggest the most advanced crafts don't just manipulate light, they manipulate reality and space-time itself.
Yeah, this brings us to the theoretical applications of general relativity, which represents the absolute highest tier of signature reduction in their analysis.
The book talks about space-time modification. It describes deploying a thin shell bubble of negative energy, or what they call a modified polarizable vacuum, right around the hull of the craft.
Right. If you possess the technology to engineer the space-time metric specifically, if you can generate a dense field of negative energy, you can create a localized bubble that establishes a uniform gravitational repulsion.
So instead of gravity pulling things in, this bubble pushes everything away.
Yes, and because gravity affects everything, any incoming electromagnetic radiation, whether that's a human radar pulse, a targeting laser, or just visible light.
Anything at all.
Yeah, it hits that gravitational repulsion and is physically deflected around the craft. The detection wave never even touches the hull.
And the physical hull itself might not even be a static object. The source explicitly details something called programmable matter.
Which relies on the manipulation of microscopic quantum dots.
Right.
You can think of quantum dots as artificial, highly programmable atoms.
But how does an artificial atom actually change the shape of a craft, though? The book says they can change structure instantly via an electrical signal.
By altering the voltage applied to these quantum dots, you instantly change their electron configuration. That means you dynamically change their physical, optical, and thermal properties. A surface made of programmable matter could shift from rigid titanium-like armor to a soft, pliable surface, or shift from highly reflective to completely transparent, all at the speed of an electrical impulse.
That is just, it's shape-shifting at the atomic level.
It really is. It allows the craft to physically mimic almost anything.
And if you have that level of control, how do you communicate? Because standard stealth is one thing, but if you send a radio transmission back to your home base, someone can intercept it.
That's a huge problem in standard stealth.
Right. The text outlines 2 ways these advanced crafts prevent signal leakage, and the first is quantum teleportation.
This relies on quantum entanglement. The sender and receiver share a pair of entangled particles. They use those particles to encode the message. Because of the laws of quantum mechanics, if an adversary, us, in this case, tries to surreptitiously intercept and measure that communication, the mere act of observing it collapses the quantum state.
So by simply trying to read the message, we instantly destroy the encrypted code and the signal itself.
Exactly. It is perfectly secure communication. There is no leakage. But the second method they studied is perhaps even more profound.
Okay.
It's called field-free potentials, or FFP.
I need you to break this one down because bypassing standard electric and magnetic fields entirely sounds like breaking the laws of physics.
It's not breaking them, actually. It's exploiting a deeper layer of them.
Oh, interesting.
Standard human detectors and antennas are built to look for the electric and magnetic fields, the EMB fields of an electromagnetic wave. That's how radio works.
Right.
But beneath those fields are underlying quantum potentials, known as vector and scalar potentials. FFP technology uses quantum processes to encode and transmit information using only those underlying potentials without ever generating the standard E and B fields.
Wait, so because our antennas literally aren't physically capable of interacting with those underlying potentials, the signal passes right through our equipment completely undetected.
Exactly. We are completely blind to it. Wow. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely recontextualizes the entire UAP phenomenon.
How so?
When a pilot says a craft shrank to zero visibility, or materialized instantly, or jammed a radar without emitting a jamming frequency, they aren't hallucinating. They're accurately describing a craft switching on a space-time modification bubble, reconfiguring its programmable matter, or transmitting via field-free potentials.
So the magic is just engineering we don't possess yet.
Precisely.
If you're tracking with us so far, we have covered a staggering amount of ground.
We really have.
The U.S. government's Covert AAWSAP program spent 2 years and $22 million following the data absolutely everywhere it led. They didn't shy away from the paranormal correlations because those effects were symptoms of a technology that bends reality.
And by taking that rigorous, unfiltered approach, they documented a terrifyingly brilliant spectrum of capability. I mean, we've gone from the brute force of ionizing plasma screens to the subwavelength geometry of metamaterials bending light backwards, all the way to localized gravitational repulsion in artificial atoms.
The science of signature reduction is not science fiction. It is a very real, very serious field of theoretical study by Defense Intelligence, attempting to decode an active, adaptive intelligence in our skies.
It raises an important question, though, about how far behind we truly are, and how much of what we observe in the sky is being actively curated by the phenomenon itself.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive talking about the false comfort of a clean radar screen. You know, the assumption that our technology sees everything there is to see.
Right.
But the AAWSAP documents suggest a reality that is far more complex and honestly a bit unnerving. These crafts use advanced mimicry, negative energy, and programmable matter to hide in plain sight.
Yeah, they actively rewrite their signatures.
Exactly. They potentially disguise themselves as natural clouds, meteors, or perfectly mundane human aircraft. Think about the implications of that.
It's a lot to process.
It is. So the next time you are outside and you look up at a perfectly ordinary commercial jet flying over, or you watch a slow-moving cloud drift across a blue sky, will drift across the sky. Ask yourself, is it really what it appears to be? Or is it just perfectly executing its signature reduction?